Tell us a little bit about what the movie's about.
So, Archenemy is about a guy named Max Fist, who is played by Joe Manganiello, and he is like a gnarly, hard-drinking, chipped-toothed, scruffy motherfucker who lives under a bridge and tells everybody about how he used to be a superhero in another dimension, but now he doesn't have any powers, and we don't know whether or not to believe him. And then he makes friends with a brother and sister who get in trouble with the local crime boss, and he kind of comes back to life and becomes a hero in like a very different way to protect them. And it becomes a incredibly violent story of redemption and love, as I love to do.
So kind of how did you come up with the idea for this movie?
It was really from looking at, we get so many superhero movies now, and therefore we all know what superheroes are, and we all know what their mythology is. We all know, they were bitten by a radioactive thing, or they fell through a thing, or they got a hammer, or whatever. Like, we're so clued into it that I wanted to make a movie that would treat people in as sophisticated a way as comic books do, in the sense that, like, superheroes are not a genre, they are a mythology, and they're a possibility to do all kinds of different things. You can do anything with a superhero that you can do in a movie, you know? You could make it a sad romance, you could make it a psychedelic crime story, you can do all of this stuff. So that was really kind of what I wanted to do, was transform sort of the love that I have for comics into what I felt like were possibilities for movies that haven't totally been explored yet.
And kind of one of the things I thought was interesting is kind of, it's a different way of giving it an origin story. Like, like kind of like you just mentioned, we all know how certain characters became the way they did, but this one instead, you spend a lot of time going back and forth whether he really is or not. How important was that for you in making this character?
It became increasingly important as I sort of started to understand, like, who he was, in the sense that, if he's done all the things he says he's done, he's been through all of these black holes and fought, multiple timelines, and he's punched through space and time, and he's, had this, he's lived in this state that was, like, so far advanced and futuristic, and to go through all that and then have the experience of being broken on Earth and having to turn to, like, drugs just to sort of forget how painful it is to be here, the toll that would take on his sense of reality. I feel like us normal people who did not fall out of a black hole have trouble sometimes, with our memories. What is really true? Like, how bad should I feel about something that happened, or how good should I feel, or was that real? Was I really loved? Like these kind of questions. And I think that when you really analyze who you are, the sense of reality can maybe fall away from your feet. And so that became like more and more of an important thing for Max. And it was less to me about like setting up the thing and then pulling out the rug in the way that, like, an M. Night movie might do, or like a Usual Suspects. It wasn't about like big plot twists as much as it was like these layers and layers of sort of psychology and the twists being maybe more emotional.
You kind of answered, I'll ask that question in a minute, but before I get there, do you think this movie's going to be, or do you expect this movie to be compared to other superhero movies, or do you care or not, or where do you think it's going to fall in this realm?
I don't know. I'm always hoping that my movies will be compared to like some crazy art movie or whatever, but it's probably just going to be compared to Daredevil, and that's fine too. I mean, when I was making this movie, I was watching like Wong Kar-wai movies. I was thinking about like, how did he made a swordsman kung fu movie called Ashes of Time that's like totally insane, and it has action, but it doesn't really feel like action, and it's about memory, and it's kind of beautiful and sad, and like, that was kind of the energy that I wanted to put into this movie. But also, he's a guy who sometimes puts on a cape and he punches people to death, so that's cool too. And if you want to compare it to The Punisher, that's fucking great. I hope I hope it makes a good double feature with whatever you want to compare it with.
All right, so you might have answered this in the previous, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is I know with Daniel Isn't Real, when we talked, you spoke about, several of the issues that the movie covered in society and with the character and so forth. So what was some messaging in this movie that you wanted to make sure you got across?
I don't know if I think about things in terms of messages, but I think about things in terms of, the emotional truth of these people. And so if you're going to make a movie where people get punched to death in the face and, shot in the neck or have their necks snapped and all the awesome things that happens, if you're going to do that, you also have to, or for me, I have to buy into like the reality of what that feels like. And there's a scene where one of the characters is like, this is too much, I don't want to be a part of this like violent insanity anymore, but it's kind of too late. I pulled into it. I think that sense of compassion and tragedy is, for me, the important part of, like, this movie can be fun, and I think the music is fun and the colors are fun, and I want people to have fun, but I personally can't ever escape the sense that we have to treat all of these characters empathetically, because that's what we need in our real lives, and that's hopefully what it keeps coming back to for me.
Well, you didn't. There's obviously certain scenes in this movie you don't hold back, and in Daniel Isn't Real, you didn't hold back either. So I guess you're very comfortable in going to the extreme, or you have no fear in pushing the boundaries there.
Yeah, you gotta get extreme. People are sitting down to watch your movie, man. Like, you gotta fuck them up. It's a genre movie. Like, you came here to see Joe Manganiello drooling through his beard, ripping somebody's, spine. That's what you're here to see, and that's cool. You got to do that. You got to flow through space time. You got to show people falling out of black holes. I mean, there's some real intense psychedelic moments in this movie, and I think those are the kind of movies that I've always loved. Those are the kind of movies that blew my mind when I was younger, whether it was Jodorowsky or Repo Man or things like that. Just crazy. You went crazy. The world is so crazy. How can we make movies that are just kind of conservative and normal? They have to be insane. We're in insane times. We're competing against reality, man. Reality is the most insane, entertaining thing there is. How could you possibly make a movie that's less than that?
Yes, and certainly this year. I think this is probably the biggest competition yet.
Right.
Speaking of Joe, how did you cast him and some of the other, I believe Zolee and Skylan? How'd that cast all come together, and how was it working with them?
Well, Joe is somebody who was, simply born to play this character. He was born to play Max Fist. He's a guy that looks like Superman. I would believe if he told me, hey, you know what, secretly I'm Superman, I'd be like, I believe you, Joe, that seems true. But he's also, such an awesome dramatic actor, and he really wants to get to the root of tragedy and play tragic figures, and so he was just an absolute dream. When he read the script and he was like, I am this guy, I understand everything about this guy. Zolee Griggs, who plays Indigo, I saw her in an audition. I had wonderful casting directors, and that's a character who on the page was written to be so colorful and sparkly, and she refers to herself as an interstellar sugar plum princess, which is something that in the auditions nobody could say that line except for Zolee. she just nailed it, and she was that person, and I put her together in the room with Skylan, and they really felt like brother and sister, and you really felt the sense of they love each other, but he feels like she's nagging him, and he wants to be doing his thing. And they were just so beautiful together. And it was so important to me on this movie to have this sense of life, to have this sense of these characters that are sort of crackling with energy. And even if the world around them is all fucked up, they still have their hopes and dreams, and they're still going to sort of, rock and roll with it.
Yeah, that for them too, it's very relatable, those characters, because what they're going through, and you can see like Hamster. He just wants to be the next thing. He just wants to do his thing and get there, and he's just willing to do whatever he can. And then the sister can too, but she's kind of doing it in a more troubling way. But
yeah, right? Like I love that you're saying that. Yeah, he just wants to do his thing, and I think one of you were asking about sort of social issues or messages, and I think there's something inherent here in like, can't we just have a world where people can just do their thing? Like it's like a non-threatening thing he wants. He just wants to tell the truth and do his thing. Like, why do we have to make that so difficult for people?
Certainly can relate to both those characters. Obviously, there's a comic aspect to the movie, and you kind of go back and forth in certain parts where it's part real time and then part comic. How did you decide to pick the parts that were comic or not, and how did doing that, was that weird doing, and how was that coming up with and getting that into the film?
Yeah, those parts of the story, I wanted them to feel like they were memories or dreams or nightmares, and so they didn't want to feel too logical or too real, so they couldn't look the way the rest of the movie was, or else you'd simply say, oh, that happened, and then this happened. And so the idea of trying to find the most sort of expressive form of animation, or something that could feel very rough, or something where you feel like, did that happen or did that not happen? Because you're kind of inside of his head asking those questions. And, some of my favorite comic books, like the stuff that Bill Sienkiewicz drew in the 80s, like Electra Assassin and Daredevil Love and War, are these very abstract kinds of art where he's using collages, and he's using like some of Electra's memories are drawn in crayon, like they're children's drawings. And I wanted to use that same kind of like emotionally expressive feeling. Was it hard? How hard was it? It was really fucking hard. It was so hard to do animation, on our timeline, on our budget. We put together a team of just 3 people and kept on, sort of delving in what is the style, what does this look like? And I was rewriting those scenes even while we were editing the movie. Like, it kept changing and trying to find exactly the right way to express it. So it was a huge challenge of the movie, but I think it's something that gives it a whole other dimension.
Would you say that was the biggest challenge of the movie, or because I guess it's different than I guess your writing part and your directing part, I guess.
Yeah, there was a lot of challenges, just in that this was such a low budget movie with such big ideas, and simply trying to tell the whole story properly and give the actors a chance to do their thing in the time that we had, with everything falling apart. It was challenging. It was all so challenging.
A bigger challenge than Daniel Isn't Real?
Yes, it was more challenging than Daniel Isn't Real. It was a more limited budget and more limited time, and it was a action science fiction superhero movie. Yeah, it was crazy. But I think one of the things that I'm happy about in my career is that things keep getting more challenging, but I keep on bringing more experience to it. So, like, if I had tried to make ARCHENEMY as my first movie, I think it would have just fallen apart after 3 days, and it wouldn't have even been finished. But now I've sort of learned a couple chops, and I know how to roll with things, and I know how to make things work for what we have, and so that's been a satisfying feeling. And I think that's you need things to always be challenging, because it pushes you, and you need to always be challenged so that you can keep growing and learning. So I'm curious to see what horrific challenges will face me if I do a 4th
movie. I appreciate your time, Adam, and it was great speaking with you again, and I enjoyed the movie a lot.
Thanks, Omar. It was really nice talking to you. Please say hi to everybody back in Florida for me.